Joining us today is Charles Bloszies, a California-based architect who will discuss the challenges and benefits of modular design and construction that his firm and clients have been executing for homeless shelters known as navigation centers, and specifically a $57 million shelter that opened this month in Redwood City, California, that is providing temporary housing for 240 people. Welcome, Chuck.
Thanks. Nice to see you.
Chuck, let's talk a little bit about the navigation centers. How was this concept initiated? What was its purpose? And how many centers have been opened thus far?
So the Navigation Center concept was developed here in San Francisco by the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. It's not a drop-in center. It just kind of, as the name suggests, the idea is to help folks navigate from life on the street to permanent housing. There have been about 5 of them built. We designed 3 of them. Actually, the city architects came up with the concept design, and we acted as the architect and structural engineer of record. They are what are called congregate uh, uh, facilities, meaning the sleeping areas are large, open dormitory style. HSH conceived of this idea based on what they call the 3 Ps: privacy, possessions, and pets. In an effort to get folks really off the street and in a safe and nurturing environment. Um, in talking to social service providers, it seems like the homeless population divides into kind of 3 different pieces. So 1/3 is just folks who can't make ends meet, kind of down on their luck. They have jobs, they just don't have a place to live. At the other end is 1/3 that have some real substance abuse or mental illness or problems that are maybe intractable, and those are, of course, the most visible folks that we see on out there, it seems. And then there's a third kind of in the middle.
Mhm.
The navigation centers are aimed to the what you might call upper 2/3. So like I said, they're not drop-in centers. People have to qualify to enter them, and they stay for 2 to 6 months, and the success rate getting folks really off the street and into permanent housing is over 50%.
That's great. This concept has been referred to in the press as a step one housing. And what would constitute step two? What is the process of transition here?
So we have developed a slightly different version of the navigation center based on modular construction. We can talk about that in a minute. The step one concept is something that we kind of coined. The idea was just steps from life on the street to permanent housing. And this is the first step. There are folks who think that the problem really is housing. If we just built more housing, then we wouldn't have this problem. Uh, then there are others who say, no, folks really need some help. When one reason that they're homeless is they can't navigate certain aspects of life to allow them to, enjoy shelter like most folks do. And we're kind of in that camp. So step one is kind of the first step off of the street into housing. Step two, we think you could call is housing, and we have a little concept that we're working on to transform the step one module idea to step two. And then we're working on something that we call step zero, which is essentially a very light touch modular idea that would be kind of a not exactly at a homelessness camp, but to be similar to the tiny homes movement that you may be familiar with,
Sure.
or camps that are monitored and set up by the city. And these would be modules that would be off the grid, set up, could be moved around. And let's say you have a big development site and you're waiting for entitlements that might take a couple of years. This would be an ideal solution to set up, use the site in the interim for that time, and then move it someplace else. Haven't gotten one of those executed yet, but we're thinking about it.
Hmm. Okay. In the Redwood City project, you've been working with the San Mateo County, which supplied the land for the shelter, and XL Construction, which is assembling the modules for the individual and shared space. Who is the module manufacturer on this project, and why was modular construction determined to be the best solution in this regard?
So starting with your last question, modular construction offers a lot of different advantages. you can build in the factory while you're building on the site in parallel. So it saves a lot of time. Also saves the costs associated with time, general conditions and what have you, that carrying costs and those kinds of costs. For example, in the San Mateo project, the final cost of the whole construction, including the modules and site built buildings, was about $250,000 a door. That may sound high, but in this part of the country, construction costs are high. If you were building an apartment unit with the same number of units, that number would be more like $600,000 a door. Wow. So it's a huge savings. And that's really what, everybody's trying to figure out how to spend their budgets on, in San Mateo County's case, their goal is net zero homelessness. So how do we spend money effectively, designing something that really is the right environment to make this work, not nurturing environments, not mean environments, that really solve or can solve the problem. XL Construction was the general contractor. They do normal general contracting. We do what you might call normal urban infill buildings too. So we were used to working with them in the normal architect contractor way. In fact, this project was design build contract with the city. So we were essentially working under contract with XL Construction. Mm-hmm. The modules themselves were built by a company in Southern California called Silver Creek. They kind of cut their teeth on building modules for schools. It's conventional construction. They start with a steel channel frame and then build with 2x4s and construction materials that we're all familiar with. They just do it in a factory. And then while the site work was being done and the factory work was being done, XL sent an inspector down to make sure that everything was coordinated, trucked 150 plus modules in, and foundations were ready, set them down in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks in the middle of a brutal winter that we had here. And the result was this incredible project.
Chuck, how long would you say it took from when the order was placed with Silver Creek to the completion of the construction?
It was about 4 to 6 months. We did look at comparing conventional construction schedule to the modular construction schedule, and this project took about a year. It would have taken about maybe 16 months with conventional construction. We had another little problem. Lots of sites that are available for these kinds of facilities are disadvantaged themselves, you might say.
Yeah.
This was underlain by bay mud, so we had to surcharge the site for 3 months to settle that down, pull off the surcharge, and then start building. So that alone, consumed some time. It did give us time to do a real thorough set of drawings and coordinate with Silver Creek, so there's an advantage to that. I made the construction a lot more seamless and smooth. But we were able to kind of factor that in and still go faster than conventional construction.
Are there any challenges that you maybe didn't anticipate, or just are part of going the modular route?
Some that are kind of surprising, and they have to do mostly with process. So if you're designing a normal building, you'll work out the concept design and then go into some of the technical details and then end up picking finishes. Since the factory work has to start early and the site work at the same time, you have to think about finishes early on. So a lot of decisions that we would make that are that we need to get information from the owner. We work very closely with in this case, Life Moves was the social service provider. We want to make sure that every room that we designed, every support office met their needs. And of course, that takes some time. So loading that up front was just different from what a normal project an architect would do. There are, as I said, huge advantages in time working with the modular vendors for sure. The procurement process takes some time. It's like buying a car in many ways, so that's a little different. And there are, like, again, like buying a car, there are some limits to the number of features that you can order. Uh, Unlike a bespoke building that we design all the time, we need to come up with a design that doesn't interfere with the factory process. The Silver Creek, of course, had their set of designers and engineers, and we had to interface with them in many areas to make sure that what we would like to have or what needed could be provided without upsetting their supply chain and aspects like that. The other little not wrinkle, but just something that has to be taken into account is that the modules themselves are reviewed and approved by the state. They're the jurisdiction with authority, but the site built work, all the civil engineering, grading, foundations, and what have you, is approved by the local building departments. And then there are all these gray areas where they interface. We call them, the boundary conditions. For example, we stacked the modules. They're 10-foot by 40-foot boxes. Actually, I could back up a little bit. One of the real advantages of modular is that they're so flexible. So a lot of times, a module factory will build a box and then put them together to make a bigger box. Our concept is a little different. It's more of a campus-like array of boxes. So the sleeping units are very small, and it's very important for the spaces among and between the boxes to be designed and developed, because that's where social activity happens, and the folks really can navigate off the street into normal life. That has a little technical consequence. So when you have the boxes arrayed, then the walkways that connect them are either self-supporting or they're connected to the boxes. The boxes are capable of supporting the walkways, so that saves a lot of time and money if you design it that way. But we designed the walkways, then had to provide the loads to the engineers of the boxes. They had to take those loads through the boxes down to the foundations, and then we designed the foundations. That loop of time turned out to be a kind of a critical path exercise that we had not anticipated. But it did end up having a really amazing design that's very tidy and clear and looks great, and costs less than it would otherwise.
Can you cite some of the amenities in the navigation centers that distinguish this concept from other types of homeless shelters?
So it starts with the support. So every client, the folks that are in these shelters are referred to as clients, which is an important distinction. It gives a sense of dignity and respect to them. So it's really focused on them, creating this nurturing environment. And with that comes a case manager. Every client has a case manager, and they're very small offices. They meet with them every day. So there is a whole set of modules that have these very small offices, conference rooms. We have a community center where events happen. Fundraising happens in the community centers. There are some security is, of course, very important. So there are a couple of modules that are at the entrance for administration and welcoming people into the facility. We have a support center, which is a site-built building. That's one of the limitations of modular. You can't build a building with a 40-foot by 20-foot clear span footprint in the factory. You can, but you have to build two of them and join them together, and that's another problem. So we have, in this case, 3 site-built buildings: the community center, the support center for job training. There's a medical and dental clinics in the building. And then probably the most amazing is San Mateo County has a culinary school for homeless people, where they are taught to be, line cooks and really a way to get a job. So this was a
Does that include job placement as well?
job placement. And so what we have in this facility is a commercial kitchen that is used by the school to cook the meals for the whole facility, and then a dining hall. This is Mike Callaghy, who's the kind of superintendent or can't remember his exact title, CEO of San Mateo County. He came up with this idea, and we thought, well, this is going to be hard to implement, but it's turned out to be one of the most successful and amazing pieces of this particular facility. Not only is it a fully functioning commercial kitchen, but it's all electric because we don't have a gas line coming to the project. So that's also something that is unusual even in a modern building.
Yeah. Hmm. Are you working on any other navigation centers right now?
We have our step one concept. Well, San Mateo County was the second. The first was a prototype built in Mountain View, 125 doors, single story, serving families as well as singles and couples. Very successful project. It won a ULI a national award last year. We're very proud of that.
Hmm.
Our governor, Gavin Newsom, used it as a site for a press conference to announce a funding program called Home Key. It was a $2 billion funding resource for developing projects like this. And in fact, most of the $57 million for the San Mateo project in Redwood City came from the Home Key funding.
Oh, really? Okay.
What we've created is a set of performance specifications. We have a kit of parts, we have drawings for each part, and we've developed it as kind of open source design, we call it. So if you want to build a navigation center, we'll send you our drawings and you can just do it. So we have one going on in San Jose that's like that now. We did the concept design and worked with the social service provider and the city of San Jose. A lot of these projects involve municipalities. And then it was handed to a general contractor who has architects in-house, and we worked with them to kind of pass the torch, and now they're finishing up the design, and it's under construction right now.
Hmm.
We have another one, and that's some 200 plus beds also.
Right.
We have one in Palo Alto, and then we're talking to a number of people kind of in the talk, let's get it to happen stage, but nothing on the boards right now.
Hmm. Any interest outside of California?
Absolutely. Again, we're a very small firm. We're 6 people, so and we're very excited to be part of socially responsible architecture, I think you can say. And the more we can get the word out, the happier we are, and we're just delighted to share our experience with anybody who wants to take us up on it.
Hmm.
Of course, we have limitations on how much we can market our
Sure.
efforts, and in fact, this program is going to help us immensely, I hope. But that's kind of the spirit of what we're trying to do.
Chuck, my last question is, what's your takeaway about modular, having worked on the navigation centers? I mean, how viable is it for some of the other projects that your practice might engage?
So this is something that architects have thought about for a long time. Prefabrication of various types have been banding about for 20 to 50 years. I think modular is here to stay for the reasons that we discussed, time and cost. But it does come with some design consequences. If you're an architect who is focusing on details, for example, like we all are, if you're stacking boxes on top of each other, the joints are very hard to detail in a way that we're used to detailing in buildings. The modular folks call them the mate lines. We call them the zippers. So if you're trying to, say, express those in a way, coming up with those details is a lot trickier than you might think. I'll give you an example of this that happened here on our Redwood City project. The modules were clad in the factory, which was a little unusual. Sometimes you clad them just on site after they're all stacked up, but that involves scaffolding, so it's cheaper to clad them in the factory. But then erecting them was a little trickier, so they used straps to around the boxes to plop them in. But nobody thought about, once you put them on the foundations or stack them against each other, how to remove the straps. So they were just cut off. So about $20,000 worth of straps are embedded in this project. So we're thinking, there's a little design opportunity there. We probably could have come up with some kind of a gizmo that looks cool, that allows them to pick them up and move them around later and not bury these straps. So I'd say if my advice to any architects who are starting to work with module construction is you'll be learning from each project all these little things that you can employ to the next one. And I think we're still a few, maybe even a decade away from having modular construction turn into what we call capital A architecture. But in the meantime, I think technically it's been a very stimulating exercise for us. Just a lot of different things you have to think of that are unusual compared to what we normally do in our design process.
Chuck, thanks for taking the time to speak with us today. This has really been interesting.
It's been my pleasure.
And thanks to our audience for joining us. This is John Caulfield from Building Design and Construction Magazine.